When I first saw Robin Hood Sherwood Builders, it is fair to say that I had a lot of hope that this game could turn into something that was quite unique. I mean, a medieval open world exploration building RPG game set within the world of Robin Hood. Who doesn't think that is something worth looking forward to? However, after being a few hours in, I'm starting to question whether or not this game hits the mark. Indeed, I'm willing to say that this game is confused at best, perhaps average at worst. And I'm going to spend the next few minutes telling you why I think Robin Hood Sherwood Builders would have been better off leaving out some of the elements that are added in and just focusing on being the best action RPG game that it could be. My name is Beggles, I do indie game reviews and previews, and if you like that sort of thing, stick around and maybe subscribe to the channel. It's worth noting right off the bat that I don't think Robin Hood Sherwood Builders is a terrible game, just not one that was promised. Indeed, if I think about the positives of this title, a lot of the RPG elements have been done really well as you make your way around the forest, which I've seen other people describe as ugly, but I'm okay with the visuals of the game, even though it's a bit dark. There are a lot of quests and random events that I quite like. Very early into the title, you'll run into a town that has a young lady being hanged, and in classic Robin Hood style, you'll need to save her. And there are events like this littered throughout the game, which I really enjoyed. And there are enough quests for people that really like those open world RPG games that became really popular 15 or so years ago. However, in a lot of ways, they are not really thought through. Sometimes things go missing, sometimes you won't have enough of what you needed to get through the quest, and sometimes the time limit is just a bit weird and you feel like you're doing everything that you can but you're still not finishing the quest. You cannot deny though that there is a lot of content here, and if you're someone that likes exploring around, finding your way, meeting new people, then this might be a positive. I really enjoyed the storyline at the start, but I felt it was a bit cheap that after a few quests it turned into just go and build some reputation, see what happens. Now, in terms of RPG elements, you can't go past the dialogue in this game. There is a lot of it, and I don't think I've seen a game that has as much. I've read some comments suggesting it might be AI generated dialogue. I don't know about that. I do know that you get some really random voices that just don't fit into the medieval aesthetic of this game. And to be honest, sometimes you've got people waffling on about storyline that doesn't really matter because you're just doing a go and rescue or go and collect kind of quest that's not really linked to the main storyline. Nonetheless, if you're someone that wants to take it slow and listen in, you'll probably enjoy that. Now, the leveling system I found a bit random. There is the ability to earn XP and then unlock new stats, but they all just kind of seem the same. Although I have to admit I haven't got too far into the combat system, so I think that might be a bit more interesting. My first impressions of this game was really all around the movement. I felt like I was driving a race car, and even just running around your first little town that you start in, I fell off bridges. I was finding it really hard to navigate. And that might be because I've been playing some other survival games that are a lot more polished than Robin Hood Sherwood Builders. There are some really random movement restrictions when you're playing through. It doesn't feel good to be climbing, and there are ladders that you can't climb, and trying to step over a really small fence by jumping can lead into these really slow animations to vault. And I've got to say, it's probably one of the poorer movement systems that I've found. It doesn't feel fun running around. Stamina system's a little bit weird. Sprinting doesn't take away stamina, but jumping does. And I kind of think that if there was more time spent on just making this a game that controls really well rather than some of the elements that I'm going to be discussing next, then it would have been more fun to play. Which leads into the combat. I would say this is the number one reason this game is not going to be a smash hit. The combat I found was pretty clunky, it wasn't all that fun, and the enemies are stupid. Now, I know that you can unlock more moves and abilities as you play through. However, early game, I'm talking about people that just seem to be there doing the same thing, not really moving in an interesting way, not really threatening you beyond if there's enough of them, they might hit you. To put one missed opportunity into perspective, I noticed early on that if I shot some enemy in the foot who was holding a shield, they'd start to do this limping animation. I thought, how cool is that? And then they take a step and they're back to normal. I think that if you put a bit more thought into it, having enemies limping around and being able to take out different parts of their bodies with your bow, that would make the combat just that little bit more interesting. The ability to use your bow, step backwards, keep shooting the closest enemy so they stagger, makes it a bit repetitive. And this is going to sound repetitive, but in line with the movement, if there was a bit more thought and polish put into the combat, rather than worrying about harvesting and other building elements, I think this game could have been a lot more top notch. So let's move on to the building. When I first saw the title, I thought this was going to be a building survival style game. And kind of similar to something that I played recently in Enshrouded, which has that really rich storyline and quest, but also the ability to have some control over the way that you build. You don't really build anything in this game, you more gather a few different resources that are then used to put your townspeople towards building. You click where it wants to go and then it sort of appears on the map. What this means is that harvesting is really not fun. When I think of games like Valheim that have the ability to harvest and take down any tree on the map, this game misses the mark. You can only cut down certain trees, which means when you need to do things like crafting arrows, you'll have to search for the exact style tree in the exact style location in order to do it. And it means you don't have the ability to actually take over and control what the land looks like around you. I think anyone that plays a building style game has that moment where they get lost from the storyline because they're just having so much fun trying to build the ultimate home for yourself. This game doesn't have that element at all. It feels like an afterthought. Indeed, it feels like a bit of a time patter because the only time I even remembered it was when I needed to get something for a quest or to try and upgrade an item or an ability. In that way, it felt like I was being thrown off course to try and complete that. It always brings me back to that question of whether this game would be any worse if you didn't have that element of harvesting and building, and I think the answer is no. I think you could easily have the ability to unlock those different buildings that you use to upgrade through quests, and then use them in the same way without the need to be chopping down trees or collecting some clay or whatever other rubbish resources we need to get. Which I guess links me onto that last point. Why are there survival elements in this game? I haven't worked that out. The need to continually drink and eat when it doesn't really have any impact on your playthrough, but does lead to you needing to control your inventory because you've got this ridiculous amount of cheese and meat and all other sorts of thing. I think if you want to be a survival game, you've got to really throw yourself into it, but if you want to be just a good action RPG game, just ignore the eating and drinking. Ignore the harvesting, focus on having a really good quality quest system, combat system, upgrade system, and really interesting characters and storyline to play through. I'm moving towards the end of the video here, and I want to repeat, I think this game idea could have been amazing, although it's just not quite there. It feels like an early access title. And I even had random situations occur, like all of a sudden the language changed when I failed a quest on the menu system. I don't think it's a bad game. I think Robin Hood Sherwood Builders is a confused game. It could have been an amazing RPG if that's what it set out to be. But because it tries to be too many things, it feels like it's cut some corners in terms of the polish, especially around the dialogue, the combat, and the movement. And it means that the world doesn't have that engaging, interesting feel. I'm not being drawn into this Robin Hood world. I'm constantly feeling like something's missing. It does have mostly positive reviews on Steam, although it's a pretty small amount of reviews, only just under 400, which is unusual for a game that could have been quite a large title. Well, let me know if you've had the chance to play Robin Hood Sherwood Builders, and if you feel like some of the things we've spoken about here is true.